Hey everyone, Seth at Hub City Vintage, and this week we're digging through the treasure trove that is the Seikomatic J13085. It houses the 395 movement, later renamed under the 62 family, and is packed with 39 jewels. This is Seiko's most heavily jeweled reference and was the flagship of the Seikomatic line at its release. If 39 sounds like a lot, well, it is. At the time this watch was manufactured in the early 1960s, jewel count had become somewhat synonymous with build quality and accuracy. In fact, during the 1950s, a war of sorts was underway based on this perception, during which brands in competition with each other would continue adding more and more jewels to their watch movements in an effort to gain superiority in the market. It wasn't as easy as it might sound, though, as U.S. import laws required that watch jewels had to be functional in order to be counted in the total. This helped to prevent unethical importers from mounting trivial jewels to their low-quality movements to increase their perceived value, and on the other side, reputable brands had to define the function of added jewels. That doesn't mean that some of these functions weren't a bit creative. The most flagrant offender would have to be Waltham. Well, technically the manufacturer that owned the Waltham name after the original company folded. Waltham 2.0 released the Centennial, which was touted as a 100-jewel movement, 17 to run the watch, and 83 jewels to act as a bumper to prevent the rotor from coming into contact with the main plate, or said another way, completely pointless. By the time new Waltham jumped the bejeweled shark, most consumers were beginning to realize the gimmickry of overly jeweled movements, and soon after, legislation was enacted to curb this type of blatant misrepresentation. Watch manufacturers with an eye for the U.S. market would have to pay increased tariffs on anything considered a luxury timepiece, and that included any watch with more than 21 jewels. The market for highly jeweled watches quickly dwindled as consumer awareness raised and tariffs removed the benefit of jewel overkill. So where does that leave us with this beauty? Likely some middle ground, as there might be a few jewels here we could do without, but at least a few of them are pretty interesting. Starting with the main plate, the first 9 are arranged along the calendar track. And Seiko's purpose for these was to ensure a smooth ride for the calendar wheel. Effective? Maybe, but I'd be willing to bet the calendar would still advance just fine without them. 10 through 13 are the third and escape wheel, which used Seiko's Diafix shock protection, meaning that there's a pivot jewel as well as a cap jewel for each in this plate. 14 is the center wheel. 15, the pallet fork, and 16 and 17 are the Diashock jewel and cap for the balance staff. The center wheel bridge gives us 18 and 19 as the sweep second wheel gets its own bearing plate jewel. The barrel bridge holds the other end of the third and escape with Diafix, so that's 20 through 24. The sweep wheel is 25, and the transmission wheel makes 26. The pallet cock is 27, and the fork itself holds 28 and 29. The balance assembly has the other 2 Diashock jewels for 30 and 31, and the impulse jewel, which is 32. Finally, the auto wind bridge has the other transmission wheel jewel for 33, and the final 6 are my favorite for this movement, as 1, they are very commonly missing, having been replaced at some service interval, and 2, to my knowledge, this is the only Seiko movement to have utilized them at all, and they are the bearings for the auto wind rotor. You can see that this example still has them in place, and 60 years later, they are still performing just as they were designed. With those 6 jewel bearings, we've identified the entire 39 jewel count. Understanding that the purpose of these jewels is to reduce friction as well as prevent premature wear, the majority of the jeweling in this movement is actually pretty functional, but not entirely necessary. For faster moving parts like the balance, pallet fork, escape wheel, and I'll even throw in the sweep seconds wheel, it makes sense that these components would have as much protection from friction and wear as possible. I would certainly trade 2 of the calendar jewels, however, in order to get jeweling for the upper and lower mainspring arbors. The mainspring is under constant and heavy tension, and though it isn't a fast mover, arbor jewels would far outlast metal bushings, as many Seiko 61 series owners are fully aware. In the end, the 395 is at worst overly engineered, but an undeniable thing of beauty. The gilt finish encrusted in red jeweling is mesmerizing, and it's housed in a mid-century package that's equally impressive on the outside. 60 years later, the performance is certainly impressive, and I'd imagine with regular servicing, it could go on that way indefinitely. Well, let's wrap this one up with a couple of fun facts. Which watch has the most truly functional jewels? That honor goes to Romain Gauthier for the logical one. Their interpretation of a constant force, chain, and fusée has a total of 63 joules. 26 of them comprise the ruby link chain to minimize friction. If you haven't seen it, it's certainly worth a closer look. And who gets the win for most total joules period? It's a pocket watch, but I'm going to allow it here. Vacheron Constantine's reference 57260 is a 57 complication wonder that's likely the most complicated movement ever assembled. It has 2,826 individual parts, and 31 of those are hands. It weighs just under 1,000 grams with a diameter of 98 millimeters. By comparison, the 39 joules in Seiko's 395 seem paltry when stacked against the 57260. Total joules, 242. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please give us a like below, or better yet, subscribe to our channel. You can also find us over at Patreon, where $7 a month gets you access to exclusive content, comprehensive rundowns of all of our upcoming inventory, and more. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.